You are about to enter the Ghostly Archives. All right, everybody, welcome to Ghostly Archive Show. I'll give you guys a few minutes to stream in. We got a few of you now. I have a wonderful guest tonight, but before I do, I have to correct some information that was on my intro. I have taken all the shows that I do and put it in one place, one happy place. So let me just let you guys know that we have one website, and in the menu tab, it features all the shows. It features Ghostly Archives, genxnews, and the Beast system that I own, and that is www.genxnewsx.com. www.genxnewsx.com. So you can check that out. Also, remember to subscribe to whatever platform you're listening on, whether it's audio or you're on social media. Follow me, of course, on X. We are doing shows Monday, Wednesday, Friday, very political, only on X, Gen X News. On Tuesday, generally, we're going to be doing the Ghostly Archives. This week, it's Wednesday. And Thursday, I'm doing the Beast System with Emily Men's House. And that's going to be at 10 p.m. Eastern, which will be streaming on X, and she has platforms. All of that is on that website, www.genxnewsx.com. Thank you very much for tuning in. We got a good bunch of you showing up, 36 of you so far. Hopefully a few more stream in, and you got some questions because this is an interesting topic. We're going to go all over the place tonight. So I have today an excellent guest. I'll do a little introduction and then we'll just bring him in and get into the topics. So if you are looking for news that is not of the usual, with topics that span paranormal, conspiracy, unknown history, true crime, spirituality, and so on and so forth, my guest Chris Mathieu and his Forbidden Knowledge Network is the place to go. He also has his own show on there called Forbidden Knowledge News, and there's a lot of other shows with a lot of other interesting hosts on that network. You should check that out on his website. We'll put a little banner for Chris up there so you can see it. If my banner will stop showing. I think there's a little bit of a glitch in the system. Can we show it? Yeah, we'll get it in a second. So currently, Chris is working on a documentary, Doorways of Perception, which is what I titled the show tonight. He also has another one on occult Louisiana and a lot more. Let's bring Chris in. It's more interesting with a guest. It's not just about me. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, Melissa, how are you? Thank you so much for having me on. Let's get weird. I'm ready.
Yeah, no, everybody, Chris's links are in I put them in the chat. They're right up there. Also, he is, he's doing a documentary. There's a lot of equipment that needs to be bought. He funds everything himself. He's totally independent. So if you guys can help him, I put a link in the conversation here. I'm going to put it in the show notes. You guys can go to his PayPal link and donate to his current documentary, Doorways of Perception. How are you, Chris?
I'm excellent, Melissa. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to this conversation. And I just wanted to mention another great way to help support us and help us get this second film in production is just go watch the first film on Tubi. Forbidden documentary, Occult Louisiana. We'd really appreciate that, if nothing else. So again, Thank you for having me on.
I love Tubi, so I'm gonna have to check it out.
Yes, definitely.
All right, so okay, where I start with every guest, do a little bit of background on yourself and how you got into and founding Forbidden News Network, and the paranormal and all of these topics.
Sure. Well, I really didn't have a true awakening till about 2012. I was just getting out of a bad marriage in a bad situation, and I was working a corporate job. I was doing pretty well with the job, but I hated it. It was something that I did not enjoy doing. It was soul-sucking work. It was corporate sales, and it wasn't for me. And at this time, I had started just really becoming interested in the nature of reality. I always was interested in the paranormal and things that go bump in the night and the occult and spirituality. But at a certain point in my life, basically when I hit my 20s and before that, I had really checked out and went back to sleep and focused on the material world and everything that keeps us in it. And like I said, around 2012, 2013, started to wake up, started to do research into everything and everything that I'd always been interested in. Started reading and talking to some of my favorite authors and researchers and just reaching out to them and having conversations. Then I started a Facebook blog called Forbidden Knowledge News, and it eventually became popular. People started reading some of the posts that I was putting up and articles, and then I figured, man, I need to talk to more people that know more about these things that I'm discussing and really have some conversations. So I started a YouTube channel, which eventually became a podcast. Thank you, Charlie Robinson, for suggesting that. I had him as a guest on my YouTube channel in the early days, and he suggested I do a podcast. I did. A few years later, and I started the podcast in about 2016, 2017, and it was still just a great hobby. It was something that I really enjoyed doing. Was working still a full-time corporate sales job that I was dying to get out of, didn't know how. And I didn't know how to transition this into a full-time career. At the time, it was just a hobby. And it took a very profound series of meditative spiritual contact experiences where I made contact with intelligences that I now understand as higher self and spirit guides. And this really propelled me to get this as a career going. And I eventually was able to quit my job, took a leap of faith, moved out to somewhere in Colorado where I really always wanted to live. I was in South Louisiana at the time, not happy there. And within a couple of years, it really picked up and I was able to pay the bills and survive. And eventually, I had started looking into other things, and we started a podcast network. We started featuring other shows through a series of plant medicine experiences. I had inspiration to start filming documentaries. And we just released our first documentary a few weeks ago on Tubi, the Forbidden documentary called Louisiana. And it's been a hell of a ride, and I am so blessed to be able to do this every day and be able to make a living from it. So that's where we're at now.
Well, that's great. And is your family origins in Louisiana? Like, do you have a
Yes.
long route in that? That is that what prompted you to do the documentary?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Louisiana. I moved to Florida when I was like 20, stayed there for a few years, went to school out there, came back, and spent most of my life in Louisiana until about 2020 when I moved out to Colorado. And all of my childhood experiences, teenage experiences, a lot of what really molded me into what I am all occurred in Louisiana. And I've never had any really profound paranormal experiences at all until after I started doing this show. But Louisiana is a paranormal hub, and
Hmm.
some of the most incredible experiences. It has an amazing history and a lot of history that people aren't aware of. So I thought, what better place to do my first movie than a place I grew up that has incredible occult history and paranormal phenomena that permeates throughout it. So took a trip last or the April before, I think it was last April, and started filming. And within about 6 months, edited and had the first film ready. And it was an amazing trip down there, and we got to see all the fun sites, the cemeteries, the plantations. I interviewed incredible people, witnesses to paranormal phenomena, did tons of research, and it was an amazing experience.
Wow, I relate. Although I haven't gone back and done anything about where I'm from. I'm from the east coast of Canada, and I grew up in a house. Well, I lived in a house for a short period of time that was haunted, old Victorian, but everything was there's a lot of superstition around, and it was just all in the culture there. Old wives' tales,
Mhm.
ghost stories, superstitions. So I think if you're born into that, I don't know if it's dying off or people are less, but if you're born into that and you're surrounded by it, you tend to have a little bit one step forward into that more than say someone who grew up, in a techie world.
Mm. Yeah, I had a very mystical childhood. I was totally into the paranormal. My imagination was off the charts. I was probably having what some might consider unexplained experiences and didn't even realize it. I was just such an imaginative kid.
Mhm.
And the swamps, just being there, it's such a mystical experience. And the energy of some of these areas, it can be dark and dense. And it also can cause a lot of people to feel depressed. Louisiana has a lot of people who unfortunately succumb to drug abuse and overdoses, and there's a lot of
Mhm.
depression, there's a lot of obesity. It's very hard to get any healthy food down there, even though the food is amazing and
Really?
delicious. It's
I'm
amazing delicious
surprised.
food, but you cannot get any organic food, you can't get anything that's really healthy. They cook everything in lard and butter and fat, so it's part of the culture to eat
Mhm.
extremely unhealthy, and unfortunately that breeds a lot of obesity. And there's just a lot of like I said, it seems like this dark energy. I've talked to a lot of people that say that they feel like they're stuck in there and they cannot leave, and they're not they sometimes people feel like they're not supposed to because it's a family
Right.
heritage. Sometimes they have their houses left to them. But the for me, the most insane thing is the deadly hurricanes that come through some areas almost every year and can wipe out your house over and over again, and they'll just rebuild it in the same place or just stay even though their roof got blown off the previous year and they had thousands and thousands of dollars of damage, or even some
Mhm.
of their relatives may die. It's awful, but they just choose to stay there for some reason. So it's very interesting, and I love my family and friends down there, but I have had over 16 people commit suicide and have drug overdoses since I was a teenager and into my 20s in Louisiana.
Well, I hear you talk about a collective consciousness, and I know what you're referring to, but we'll get into for the audience what you're referring to. But I think there's a big human collective consciousness, but obviously certain cities have some sort of collective mindset, and perhaps, unfortunately, and I think even groups have it. Perhaps, unfortunately, the mindset that they've learned is obviously very negative, for a lack of better word.
Yeah, yeah, it's very difficult when you're growing up in some of those situations. And I just know a lot of people who have been stuck in jobs that they don't enjoy, and a lot of bad relationships that stay
Mhm.
together when they really shouldn't. So there's something I feel about the energy when I leave the state and I come to places like I'm at now, Colorado. It's a very high energy place for me. I don't feel bogged down when I go back to Louisiana and even similar places like Mississippi, Alabama, some places in
Mhm.
Florida. There's to me this dense energy that seems to weigh me down, and I can feel like there is something almost feeding off of me, some sort of energetic like parasite. I don't know how to
Right.
describe it, but there's something different about those areas to me.
That's really interesting. Do you think some of it could, like, do you think it's just in those areas, or do you think
Oh
there could be a
no.
little bit of that energy inside you that's triggering? Like
It's
it's
it's probably a mix of both. And I think that it also has a lot to do with what you've experienced there. I mean, I've had a
Mhm.
lot of dark times there. I've had a lot of good
Mhm.
times, but I've had a lot of years of depression in Louisiana just because I was unhappy in relationships or I was unhappy in
Mhm.
a job, and that probably triggers some things. And if feel like you're stuck in those areas, it's not going to be a positive experience for you. So I think you're right. I think it has a lot to do with your own mindset and perspective. And I think there's just some different places are not for certain people. You resonate
Mhm.
with a certain place that maybe someone else doesn't. I'm sure there's a lot of people who thrive in South Louisiana who think it's the best place in the world and they're doing amazing. And I know a bunch of these people. But for me, it was not for me. I was born in the wrong place,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I think that has, a lot to do with that.
That's interesting. Now, let's get into the collective consciousness because you talk about spirituality and collective consciousness. I've heard many of your guests talk about it on your show. And guys, if you are not subscribed to Chris's show, Forbidden News, Forbidden, you got to go over to his Rumble channel because he has, like, there is tons of interviews that are really fascinating with a whole bunch of different guests. But for people who don't know, what is a collective consciousness?
Well, to me, I'm I'll be honest, I don't know yet, but I have an idea, and the further I go into my research and as each day passes, I'm blessed to be able to have a show where I can learn from incredible researchers and mystics and people who know a lot more about some of these things than I do. And when it comes to the collective, this could mean different things to different people. To me, it's what I would think is source. Well, some people may call it God. I think there is a connection between every living thing on this planet, and maybe not even, maybe even goes even further than that. To everything that we could interact with on this planet has some level of consciousness. But when it comes to us as humans, we have a certain connection. We have a certain connection to nature, to God, and to each other. And there's this etheric field where it's also contains information, what probably we would understand as free energy. And this all, I somehow I believe connects to the collective consciousness. And what we're experiencing right now is a perfect example of how we are all connected. We're experiencing this incredible hundredth monkey effect within just a few years, just since 2020 happened and all the madness started unfolding. People have started to change. The consciousness of the of global society has shifted in an incredible way, and you can see how many people are waking up to a lot of the nonsense that's happening. And it was all started because people became aware once the agendas started rolling out, because people like yourself, people like myself, others,
Mhm,
many others started ringing the alarm bells and sharing their observations. And that's
mhm.
all it took. People all over the planet started paying attention to that, and then they saw the same things. And now it's like they can't run a good op anymore because so many people are aware of the bullshit, they're not falling for it
Yeah.
anymore. So that is just an example of how for me, the collective conscious works, and how it can manifest in our reality.
And a lot of times I think one person will get an insight and then they'll put the message out and sometimes it takes a long time and they may not be the one that gets it out rapidly, but they'll give it to other people and over time it just builds slowly. And within, I don't know, 30, 40 years, it becomes an unstoppable force. I mean, it really, I mean, what you're saying kind of reminds me of the Force in Star Wars, you know,
Yes.
how it builds.
Yeah, that's exactly how I think about it. It's I think it has a lot more than we could understand to it, especially when you look at the possible free energy aspects and what people understand is like the Akashic records. There
Mhm.
is this flow of energy that surrounds us at all time that we interact with, and it can even cause what some people understand as manifestation or synchronistic communication, how the universe will send you certain messages in different ways through numbers or songs or even
Mhm.
people or events and things like that. And I think that's all connected to our collective consciousness. And right now there's a with everybody becoming incredibly aware of things. I think there's a quickening of this, and we it's like we are, the more aware we become, the more that we have an effect on collective reality, and things are changing at a more rapid pace, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and we're kind of at this stage. I think as technology goes faster, everything changes, everything goes faster. It really is about information travel and how fast it goes. What do they call that? Kali Yuga? Like we're at this phase where it just is too fast for our brains to even comprehend sometimes.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
gets too overwhelming.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and the response to that right now, what you would call the elitists, globalists, the evil leaders that are trying to force these ridiculous agendas on it, is they're aware that this is happening. So there's a few things happening. They're trying to flood us with bad information and crazy conspiracy theories. They're infiltrating our communities. They're ramping up a lot of the pharmaceutical campaigns. They're trying to get so many
Hmm.
people on drugs and checked out of things. And the fear is a huge one. They want to get people hopeless and with one event after the other and keep people in a perpetual state of fear, because if we're afraid of this boogeyman, we'll be asking our own government boogeyman to save us. And that's what they always want. But what's happening now is it's not working as well anymore. We're entering a very interesting time where everything is being deflected, and it's a really bad time to have dark secrets, I'd say, especially if you're in the political realms or in a very high position of power. Seems like everything is coming out somehow, and there's some strange power shifts going on. I always go back and forth to as to whether we're looking at some kind of top-down pyramid orchestrated thing where they're going off of this playbook that seems like the book of Revelations, where they're bringing on event after event to demoralize people,
Well,
leading up to this massive global war, possibly.
it feels like they are really trying to push the end of days kind of scenario. Like they're trying to make certain elements happen in
Yes.
chronological order so they can say, hey, look, these biblical prophecies are happening. We want to have them happen. Because I don't know why they necessarily I mean, we could get even deeper to think that they're feeding some kind of energy far beyond human understanding. It's so bizarre. I wouldn't wanna bring about the end of days. I mean, they keep saying they wanna, you know, heal the earth and save the environment. It certainly sure as hell doesn't feel like they do. I mean, who would wanna heal the environment and then tell us to go on a lockdown and make us all use disposable masks?
Mhm. It's
It
extremely hard to tell because everything is so compartmentalized. From the
Mhm.
top down, the right hand has no idea what the left hand is doing. And people that are at the bottom, people in local government, police, uh, any type of law enforcement, military, things like that, they are following orders and they have no idea what the orders are about from the level above them. And that's goes the same all the way up the power pyramid to the very top. So even people in middle management or close to the top, they may have an idea of what is behind some of these agendas. But again, there's layers and there's going to be a bigger picture behind that. And there's multi purposes for every dystopian thing unfolding right now. So you can't just focus on one angle of
One thing.
things. And the most difficult part
It's
right
like
now is
4D chess.
the infiltration of these communities and the
Well,
blasting of so much crazy information that they're trying to get people to not know what is up and down, or what's true.
yeah. One of the one of the most sacred groups that they're trying to destroy is the family.
Yes. Yes.
That has been on the agenda for a very long time, since probably the 50s, 60s. They have been trying to destroy the nuclear family, and they've been doing a pretty good job of it. But I don't know. I think I'm starting to see signs that people are pushing back.
Yes, it's a wonderful time, I think, right now, because there are people not only pushing back, but just not participating. And I think that's one of the hugest things that we can do collectively is not participate in these agendas, because honestly, we're the ones who gave these people this power. At some
Hmm.
point, we voted these people in. At some point, we bought their products. We participated in some of the
Hmm.
agendas. We may not have been aware what was happening at the time, but we funded these guys, and we've been funding
Yes.
them for a long time. And once we just stop and that cash flow stops coming in, there's no support and there's no reaction and there's no energy loose harvesting. There's nothing to harvest anymore because we're not participating.
That's
That's when
right.
everything falls apart for me.
So I've got some little clips. I was gonna upload them onto my system, but my system would not upload them. So I'm gonna share my screen. I want to get into like near-death experiences because that's part of consciousness and stuff. But I'm gonna
Yes.
show some clips. I'm gonna share my screen here. I usually have the video right in, and my goodness, I was like, it just wouldn't take the video. So let's have a look here. Here we go. Sharing. And it's supposed to be my favorites. There we go, guys. Excuse me. Okay, we'll go into atheist near-death experience.
Everybody
Here you go.
dies. But some people have come back, and their stories of what's on the other side might be our only glimpse into what comes after all of this. And the group of stories that I personally find most interesting within the near-death experience realm come from atheists. Nancy Rhines died an atheist after being struck by an SUV being operated by a distracted driver, and she was pinned between the vehicle and the asphalt as she was drugged. And in that moment, she experienced something that she describes as dual consciousness, where she was simultaneously being drugged by the vehicle and watching the accident unfold from above it. Now, after being rushed to a local hospital and undergoing surgery, Nancy actually died. And after doctors brought her back, she recalled an experience she had where she woke up in a mountain meadow full of flowers and trees and massive mountains in the distance. She didn't experience panic or fear, but she did experience a massive level of confusion because she was still her, and she recognized the fact that she shouldn't be where she was because she was an atheist. She didn't even believe in any of this. And she says that the moment that that thought hit her, she felt a voice from all around her that said, "This is your home, and you belong here." And what's so interesting is this is really common within near-death experiences, a sense of unconditional love and belonging, even for people who didn't believe in God during life. There's actually another case that I find really interesting. Eben Alexander was a neurosurgeon who contracted a rare form of bacterial meningitis in Israel, and by the time he was hospitalized, doctors pronounced him brain dead for 7 days before he somehow came out of his coma. And his experience was really similar to Nancy's. He felt a sense that he could do no wrong, he had done no wrong during his life, and he felt just an overwhelming surrounding sense of unconditional love. And also, what's interesting is both of these atheist near-death experience survivors and hundreds of others experienced something else similar, which is their deceased loved ones coming to greet them on the other side. Parents, grandparents, siblings, children whose lives were cut short. According to the people who have been there and come back, our people are the ones who meet us to guide us to the other side in the end. They all also say that the experience is more real than anything they ever experienced during life, almost like they're waking up from a dream into what is actually real. They describe on the other side colors that don't exist in this plane of reality. They describe being able to see and feel sound. And there's actually a studio that's making a movie about all of this, and they've made one of the first real attempts to visually represent as close to the descriptions of survivors what was actually seen. It's called After Death, and those guys were cool enough to send me a couple of clips to include for this piece of media. So a lot of what you've seen while I've been talking about this are the actual visuals described by survivors who claim to have been on the other side. They're visuals that can't be captured on films. They have to be created by digital artists. And in this movie, they've tried to render what this space looks like, where everyone is connected through love and through light, as survivors describe. And I think I've been on this NDE NDE rabbit hole because of everything that's going on in the world. I don't know if any of this is real. I almost don't care that none of it can be proven, because all of this has just been hitting different because of the global situation that we're all watching unfold. And I have no idea what actually happens after this. But with everything going on, I hope it's as peaceful as people say. And I hope it's as happy and real as it's described by people who claim to have been there and have come back. What do you think happens?
All right.
Yeah, I love that. That's the story, man. That's the story of near-death experiences. And in my upcoming film, I'm gonna have a few near-death experiencers talk about what they experienced, and it's all very similar. I personally have never interviewed anyone that has had a negative near-death experience, and we can talk a little bit about that because I've heard from other people about what possibly could be going on when people have these negative near-death experiences. But yeah, it's like he said, these people, they feel like whenever they cross over, whether they died, however they died, they feel like when they're there, they just have this ultimate remembering that they're home. It feels like home, and it feels like waking up from a dream. And there's always some sort of communication, psychic communication, instant psychic communication, this feeling of love, unconditional love that like you've never experienced in your life before. You don't have a body, you can just perceive everything and understand everything. And everybody's experience is different but similar in certain ways. And there are different types of entities that people come into contact with. Maybe they don't see them, maybe they do see them and they're just light, but it's always something slightly different. And I think that speaks to people's experiences in their lives, what they have come to understand, what their perception is. It's based on their experiences, what they can understand. And I think that's what this phenomena presents itself as, something that they can understand, something that they can relate to, what's going to be the most profound connecting factor for them during these experiences. And that's why they have these slight differences. And as for people who have the negative experiences, there has been so many positive when they highly outweigh the negative experiences. But for the few that people have had, the understanding that some researchers have is that they are in a terrible state when they pass, that they are in a state of mental hell. Basically, they are either extremely depressed, they are not in a good place in their life, they have a part of this belief system that believes in fire and brimstone hell, and that's what gets projected to them in some way. And it's not that that's where they're going to go, but it's kind of like a warning or a reminder that you need to get back on the right track. So
Right.
that's my perspective of those different types of situations and experiences. But the near death experience has very, very strong similarities to other people's experiences in dreams, out of body experiences, astral experiences, psychedelics,
Yeah.
meditation. So there is connections between all of even people who have extraterrestrial contact. There's some similar things that are happening there. And I think there's profound connections between all of that.
I know that they mentioned dual consciousness in there.
Yeah.
I have not had a near death experience, but I had an out of body experience twice in my life. Once when I was very young, I was about four or five, and me and this other little girl, we were going to, in those days when you're 4 and 5, you could go to the corner store by yourself and buy things, and you could even buy cigarettes for your parents.
I know.
Seriously, I'm not
Yeah.
lying.
Yeah.
And so she ran ahead of me and I ran to catch up with her. And the top landing, it was 2 stories up, was slippery. And I slid right through over the side down to pavement. and I just popped right. I could see multiple different viewpoints. I could see in my body, I could see above, and I could see some other viewpoints. And because I was so young, I didn't understand what was happening, and I just kind of forgot about it until later when I was watching something on near death experience. I'm like, oh, I had something like that happen when I was 4 or 5. And it, yeah, trauma, sometimes even if you're not NDE and you're not dying,
Yeah.
it can just pop you right out of your body.
There's an interesting phenomenon that happens even when you don't have anything going on. Some people just start like tripping out of nowhere. They have these, what I understand is DMT leaks that occur in their brain just randomly, and they'll have these profound spiritual experiences out of nowhere. Now, I know when you're a developing fetus, you have the DMT that enters and floods your brain. When you die, you have the DMT that also floods your brain, and it's like some kind of doorway or transition material that allows for you to perceive the other side. And I think it does act as some sort of gateway or doorway when we are leaving this world. But when you look at the experiences people have when using things like DMT and other psychedelic experiences, they have contact with loved ones, spirits. They can perceive the other side. And I've had many, many of these profound experiences through meditation and plant medicine experiences. So that's just another one of the connections. I might have lost track of what you originally asked, though. What was that?
Well, I was just talking about the dual consciousness,
Okay.
and that even if you don't have an NDE, you can have mountain climbers have that kind of thing all the time. Even if you don't have, there's something about trauma that can pop you out of your body, so you can have different perspectives. And obviously, a near-death experience is a really severe trauma where you actually don't just pop out of your body. You start going beyond that. So I never went beyond popping out of my body because I was very much alive. I wasn't going to bleed to death or anything. And it was it was a horrible fall. Like, it was really traumatic. And I literally just walked, like, they were surprised I didn't break my back. And I literally just walked out of the hospital perfectly fine.
Oh, wow.
But so it's like there's sort of processes where you have some trauma, but then of course when you're in the near death experience, you've gone far beyond that, and you're detaching from your body, and so you go into something totally different. And so the question is always, I get skeptics, is are you really dead, or are there processes in your body that are still functioning to make these things happen? Like, they'll give you the dying brain, they'll give you it's chemicals are flooding through your body, but a lot of people have like experiences. There's no way that it can just be dying brain, because they're consciously, they can tell you things that are happening. A blind woman, could see. So something else is going on beyond some of the clinical explanations.
Yeah, and they're also right now they're doing some very interesting things with DMT studies where they're putting people in IV extended release DMT trips, and they're mapping out the landscapes and entities and things that they're coming into contact with, and they can have two people that can have a similar experience and be in these same types of realms. So I think that is super interesting. Also, people who have near death experiences and come back miraculously healed of something, or their cancer is gone. And this also can happen with spiritual angelic experiences, extraterrestrial contact experiences, these kind of astral surgeries that occur where people are miraculously healed by these non-human entities. That's another layer of all that.
So, and I have a friend, she's been on Where Did the Road Go podcast. She's a really good friend, Cheryl Lee, and she had a couple of near-death experiences. And when she came back from her final one, she used to be an artist, and it literally transformed her personality from an artist into a scientist. And people usually think it's the other way around, but she's actually been in studies and scientific studies in labs and universities on this stuff, about, like, she actually had some mild level of like psychokinesis stuff and weird poltergeisty things started happening around her when she came back, and it kind of scared her. It
Wow.
was really
Yeah.
it was a really bizarre experience. Usually people say when they come back from an NDE that they're more artistic, but hers was total reverse. She dropped all the music and the painting and became a scientist.
Some
Interesting enough.
Yeah, some of the most extreme cases that I've heard of that, if you want to put it like a walk-in, I don't know if you've heard of that term, where they'll have a
Mhm.
completely different personality and they claim that they're not even the same person. I've had a woman on my show
Wow.
that claimed that she had a near-death experience. When she came back, she was not her. She was a completely different being with completely different interests and personality, and her family even disowned her because they were like, "You are not who we raised. You're not our
Yep.
daughter." So it's very interesting
Well,
how these things
my
can happen.
friend's marriage fell apart.
Oh,
It was like,
wow.
oh yeah, it was like she was totally different, and she's, by the way, a really lovely person as a scientist. She's a smart cookie. I'll say that. I've got another video. I've loved TikTok videos lately to use as conversation drivers. So I've
Mm.
got another one, and it is on the sort of DMT psychedelic, because I had a feeling we were gonna go this way. And again, I couldn't download it because this system did not like their file. And so let's go. Here we go.
This is one of the most famous DMT trip reports ever. In fact, you've probably seen artwork from it because it's from none other than the painter himself, Alex Gray. What's weird about this one is that a couple of days before Alex Gray had this trip, he had a very strange dream. In this dream, he saw a figure hovering above the earth with its top half entering a ball of light. And when he woke up, he wrote it down to basically turn it into a painting. The reason this is important is because a couple of days later, as he's smoking DMT for his very first time, he realized his body was transforming into something else, the same figure that he'd seen in his dream. He watched his body as it became more and more translucent until eventually it just popped into a completely new world, which Alex Gray says was the world of his painting. Just like in the dream, there was a great ball of light, but this one was made up of incredibly complicated jewels and patterns, and he could sense somehow that it had a mind of its own. It was pulling Alex towards it until he was completely submerged inside this white ball, and once inside, he said that he felt an ecstatic, melting feeling. What's interesting though is that in the same trip, he would enter a place frequently visited by people who take DMT called the Dome. This dome was made up of faces that merged with one another and countless eyes that stretched far into the distance. Many people, including myself, have seen these eyes, and they tend to feel like they have some sort of hive mind with its own sentience. It's not scary, but it's definitely weirdly real feeling. After this experience, Alex was obviously pretty mystified, but later he would have an ayahuasca trip that took him to a very similar but way more intense place. Again, he saw heads that merged with one another, but these heads felt like they belonged to gods. He said each one had 4 faces and were connected together like columns in a sacred space. As Alex flew around these heads, he noticed that they were made up of countless grids, and inside these grids were spinning entire galaxies. Keep in mind, this isn't just a visual he's having. This felt extremely real to him. Without being told, he could sense an infinite consciousness that was completely interconnected. And even though these gods were anthropomorphized, he said that he realized that they encompassed the entire cosmos. Alex Gray's own consciousness then started to merge with these gods, so that, in his own words, his mind became as vast can be, and that he was one with all of space. When you put it into words, it may not sound that insane, but you have to realize it's way beyond anything we can imagine while we're sober. This is why I don't promote the illicit use of these substances, because they are seriously intense, and so if you try to use them recreationally, I can imagine you potentially being traumatized. This video is made only to educate and help potential research.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, he's absolutely right about that. You have to exercise extreme caution, respect, do a lot of research, and preparation, and even prayer, and ask for protection before you even think about doing any of these type of strong psychedelics.
Yeah, it's not like a trendy, yeah, I want to do it, just like your, an album or the latest Stanley mug that you're going to go buy, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
You know what I find interesting about that description and then the eyes? So you know how we have this idea of angels, but when you go into the Christian
Yes.
Bible, the description of angels is completely different, and some of them have eyes all over feathers and everything. And some of them are describing similar stuff when they're actually on a DMT trip, like things with eyes all over. That I find that really interesting.
I have seen very similar things myself. If you'd like, I could discuss a couple of the most profound experiences that I had, the ones that really led me down my path where I'm at right now, if you like.
Sure, absolutely.
So in 2020, I was still working a corporate job. I was doing the show as well. It was a great hobby. Wasn't making much money at all, maybe a couple $100 a month. And I really was getting to the point where I wanted to do this full time as a career. Didn't know how to make the transition. I was also going through a bad breakup with an ex girlfriend. My job was really sucking. I just was stuck. I didn't know where to go. And something kept popping in my mind, meditate, meditate, meditate. And I'd never done meditation before. So I started trying to do this. This was in probably late 2020, and it was not very successful at first, the first few times I tried. But one evening, before I started even tried meditating, I was outside with a neighbor, and this may or may not have anything to do with this story, but I feel like there's a connection there. I was outside with my neighbor. We're just talking about something, and I look up in the sky, and there's these three orange flames, like in a triangular formation, slowly going up. And I'm looking at him and trying to get my neighbor's attention, talking to him, trying to point to the UFO, whatever is in the sky. And he just refuses. He's talking, yapping away, doesn't look at the sky. So I'm watching this thing and it slowly goes up. And then it's like it started to shoot straight up and then disappeared, just blipped out of existence. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'll file that in the interesting category. Couldn't say if it was a UFO or what the hell it was. But later on that night, I got, put it out of my mind and I tried to meditate, and I had utilized 432 hertz tones, which I hadn't before. And this, I believe, was a key factor for me to achieve the state that I was to get into. And I was able to go into a really deep meditative state, started seeing beautiful geometric shapes, this very calm and relaxed feeling washed over me. And all of a sudden, I can just feel this love, this incredible love like I had never felt before. And this beautiful blue light in my subconscious is getting brighter and brighter. And I hear a voice talk to me. And this has never happened. I talk to myself all the time in my head, and it wasn't like this. This was something completely different, and it was like instantaneous psychic communication. And it started out just an introduction, hello, how are you? And I responded, and I got kind of terrified because I didn't know what was going on. And I grew up Catholic, so I kind of reverted to some Catholic dogma, and it's like, in the name of Jesus Christ, are you a demon, are you good, or something like that. And I could feel like this thing was just laughing, and I felt this love. And before I could even finish asking if it was good or bad, it was like, yes, yes, you don't have to worry about any of that. I am of Christ consciousness and things like that. And I was immediately calmed down. I just felt these amazing feelings of love and connection. I asked this entity, this voice, what its name was. It said, you will never be able to pronounce my name. You call me what you feel like calling me. And I had just thought of my cousin's name. When I was growing up, hadn't seen this cousin in a long time, but I thought his name was cool. His name was Laird. So I was like, all right, you're Laird. And so Laird and I began to have this incredible conversation. I wasn't even in a meditative state anymore. I had gotten shocked and popped out of that state, and this voice is just still steady talking to me. And we have a 2-hour conversation about me and where I'm at in my life and the things I need to do to get myself happy and in a better state. And maybe you do Forbidden Knowledge News as a career. And they were like, first you need to quit this stupid job that's killing your life. You need to heal your childhood trauma. You need to stop being in these toxic relationships. All these things, basically telling me how I was going down the wrong path and things that I needed to change. And this experience kind of it lasted a couple of days. Like the communication faded after the first day, but I went into a meditative state 2 days later and regained the contact with this being. And some of the instructions for myself were not only the things that I told you, but it even mentioned magic mushrooms and psychedelics. And like I told you at the beginning of the show, I come to understand that this voice is my higher self. It's my higher self. And there are other intelligences that are associated, which I consider my spirit guides,
Mhm.
ancestors. Some of them may not even be what we consider human intelligences, but they're all connected to me somehow. And this, I made contact with them. And obviously, this intelligence of my higher self knew that I was going to eventually be doing consciousness exploration. And it suggested the magic mushrooms to me because it would assist in my overall healing process and journey to where I was going. So that didn't occur till much later. After this second experience, I'm in an incredibly relaxed meditative state. I'm talking to my guide, Laird, and all of a sudden, I can see that I'm on what looks like a spaceship. I can see outside, there's space outside the windows, there's different levels, and these etheric beings start appearing to me in my subconscious vision, and they all have hoods on. They all look like animal human hybrids, and they're just beaming this incredible love to me, asking me if I'm ready to truly begin some kind of journey. I don't remember exactly what the conversation was that they were saying, but it was profound. And they began to give me more information about how I can proceed to go where I wanted in my life and make this Forbidden Knowledge News thing a career. So within 6 months, I quit my job. This experience was so profound. I just quit, took out my 401k, moved to Colorado, and just started pumping out episodes. I was doing maybe 2 or 3 episodes a week in Louisiana, and I started doing like 5 or 6 a week and just putting out as much content and promotion as possible. And within a year, I was shocked to be able to pay my rent. And then within a few months, I paid able to pay rent and eat food. So things just got amazingly better. And I owed everything to that initial contact experience. And after I moved to Colorado, I actually started growing my own magic mushrooms. And that's when I started my vision quests. And the real profound experiences started to occur. And I don't want to take up too much time with that. I do have one really interesting experience that I'd like to share with you, but do you have
Absolutely.
anything, any questions about anything so far?
No, absolutely. Go ahead and share it.
Yeah, so this was one of the critical turning points for where I'm at now, and what really shifted me to want to start doing documentaries for some strange reason. I'm still trying to see where the connection is, but I was, I had a girlfriend at the time. This was 2022, I believe, 2022. I had just
Mhm.
moved to northern Colorado. I was with a girl at the time that I had just moved into me with me. We weren't really that serious, but it was a mutually beneficial situation to live together at the time, so
Right,
we
right, right.
did. And she was a moderately pretty gifted psychic healer, and she worked with people doing past life regressions and things like that. But she had never had a psychedelic experience. And until this time, like I said, our relationship was okay. Nothing really, we didn't really have that strong connection. And she knew I was using psychedelics and magic mushrooms, and she had requested to try some. And I was like, all right, we'll go in together. We'll have a little journey. And I started her off small. I just, 2 grams. And by the way, my doses range anywhere between like 3 and 5 or 6 grams. So I go really big whenever I'm going in and just have the most profound experience as possible. But I started her off with just a couple of grams, and couple of hours go by and she's not feeling anything. And I even increased her dose. By the end of the night, I'd given her like 5 grams of mushrooms, and she claimed she did not feel anything. Well, this immediately, it's kind of like a red flag. It's kind of weird. I don't know what's happening. I never met a person that could eat that much mushrooms and say they didn't feel anything. But I was like, whatever. Maybe she's got something physiologically going on. Who knows? But in that experience, things started happening that were very strange. First off, she started to be able to seemingly control what was coming out of the radio in certain ways and switch songs just by telling the radio to switch songs, which I'm still not sure how this happened. It was very strange at the time. I was just like, all right, whatever. I'm just tripping. This is weird. Then she had offered to do a healing session where she would walk me to a traumatic event in my childhood, and we would heal whatever happened. And she's done this for folks before. She's actually done this for me before, never while I was on mushrooms. I was like, well, why not? Let's give it a shot. So she began to regress me to a traumatic childhood event that proceeded to remember the whole thing, and it seemed like this was a great thing happening, and I felt amazing after it got resolved, and it seems like everything was great. And we were just having a conversation there, and all of a sudden, what she was telling me started to not make sense at all. It started to get very dark. And this is what I remember her saying. She claims she didn't say this, but this is what I remember her saying. She's like, I found you shortly after you came to this planet, and I attached myself to you, and I helped you grow, and I brought you to where you are now. And now you don't love me anymore. I can tell you want to get rid of me. And as she said that, I shit you not, her face, everything shapeshifted into a reptilian, the nastiest, scariest reptile thing I've ever seen. Teeth, yellow eyes. She even grew a couple of damn feet. Huge reptilian thing in my room. She's got my girlfriend's nightgown on still. It's got, and then it starts like kind of chasing. I bust out of the room. I'm freaking out. I'm like, what the is going on? And it starts chasing, kind of following me around the house saying, what, you don't love me anymore? You don't love me anymore? So I don't know what's going on. First thought, all right, I have died and I'm in hell. I just have to figure this out. So that's it. I'm dead. I'm in hell. This is all I could do is try to figure this out. So I'm freaking out. Don't know what's happening. I run to my basement, lock the door, and then all of a sudden everything in my house changes. I'm like in a different dimension. There's like bars on the windows. I look outside. The sky is blood red. There is like just mold and everything looks dark and dingy and different. And it's like I was in a completely different place. Somehow I navigated back to my room. And before I go any further, I just want to say I've never had any experiences like this before.
So it wouldn't be because you were hallucinating or anything.
Well, that's what I'm going to get to. So
okay.
I've never had an experience like this before. Not so all encompassing. Yes, I've had hallucinations and visions and things like that, but this was like my entire reality shifted and I was somewhere else. Somehow I made my way back to my room. Everything in the house looked different. I don't know how I made it back. I didn't know what to do, so I locked myself in the bathroom and I start just running water on myself. And I'm like, oh man, either I've died or this is just I'm in a coma. I don't know what's happening. And I start praying. I said, God, please help me. And the second I started praying, I felt this rumble from like within my stomach. It was crazy. Everything started shaking, and I puked up this black goo, viscous stuff that went down the drain of my bathtub. And I've never seen anything like that. It was insane. And as I was puking up this black stuff, my whole bathroom just flashed and this bright light came on and everything was back to normal. Like everything, the dinge and the dungeon like atmosphere was gone. I felt incredible. I felt this powerful, loving presence in the room with me. And I walk outside, and my ex-girlfriend's just like, "What the fuck's going on?" And I told her what happened, and she's like, "Oh, well, that's interesting." And her reaction was kind of strange. But after that happened, our relationship fell the hell apart, and I started seeing things about her, that her dark side, basically. And she started displaying, very strange behavior, trying to
Mhm.
get money out of me, all kinds of crazy stuff that just started happening after this. And eventually I had to break up with her and have her move out because things were just falling apart so off terribly. Now, I have different perspectives of what could possibly have happened, and they shift constantly. But where I'm at right now is I believe that she may have had some sort of reptilian attachment that
Mhm.
made itself known, that I was able to perceive during this experience. And
Do
that's what came through. And even though
do you
she
think
may not
do
have
you
been aware, it did.
do
Go
you
ahead.
think you might have shifted to another perception or dimension where you could
Yes, I
see
do.
something that you can't see here that's
Yes.
always there?
It's possible, so yes, yes. Now, I'm not saying that my ex-girlfriend was a reptilian. I it's
Well,
possible,
you know
it's
what? That's
possible,
really
but,
kind of
you
you
know.
because most people would be like, "Yeah, she was a reptilian.
You see,
That guy was a lizard. What a jerk."
yeah, I mean, that's too easy, but, it's possible, but what I'm more lean to is maybe she has this dark side or this darkness within her or this
Mhm,
attachment, this spiritual reptilian-like attachment that came through and made itself known to me. And maybe it's sensed that I was going to eventually break up with her, and kind of projected that weirdness out there. But one of my friends, Steven Snyder, I don't know if you've ever had him on your show. He's a great author, and he had a very kind of similar experience, but not with that. But he was on mushrooms, and it was towards the end of his experience. He thought it was all over, but he was going with a friend to pick up something from this building that they were having a child's party in, and they had like this kind of smoke machine happening and all these kids running around. And he doesn't remember just exactly why they went to there, what they were going to get, but he's just kind of standing in the corner of this room, somewhat tripping on mushrooms, watching these kids run around, smoke machine. And then all of a sudden he looks over, and there are like 5 or 6, 7 or 8 foot tall gray aliens walking around amongst the children, like doing these weird like experiments, touching them on their heads, doing all kinds of crazy shit. And then they notice him, that he can see them. And they start like communicating with each other, like, "No, he's not supposed to see us. How can he see us?" And then
mhm.
they're like psychically communicating with him, like, "How can you see us?" And he just freaked out and left. So I definitely think that when we're having these experiences, we are entering realms that we can't normally perceive.
And now I know there's some people, they'll say they'll get into the conspiracy theory. I've had, my friend Nish and Jer from the, Obelisk podcast on, and Nish will always say, "I can see these things walking around. There's like they're not human. They're walking in the streets," and she's not on anything or any psychedelics
Yeah.
that I'm aware of. Do you think like some people can just see
Oh,
these things
yeah. Oh, I
normally,
mean, it's
and
not
then
like.
psychedelics help some people, and this is actually real? Like
Yeah, I
there's
think
like
that some
lizardy
people don't
weirdos
need
everywhere?
any type of altered substances. They are just at that state of awareness where they can perceive these things. Some people were born with it. I interviewed a couple of individuals just this week that were born with the ability to see auras and dead people and talk to spirits and all these things. But for me, since I was not didn't naturally have that connection, the plant medicines, the psychedelics allowed me to have these experiences where I could perceive that. But I think it can be brought on by anything. And people, one of the most amazing things that I found is people who have an experience and say they didn't believe in any of this stuff before, but they go out in the woods and they see an alien or Bigfoot or some kind of cryptid. This opens up their perception, and then they'll start to be able to see other things, and they'll have more and more of these
Mhm.
experiences unless they reject them and totally block that off. That
Right.
also can happen too.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. Now, I wanted to ask, is there a purpose for being like, I mean, we say, like, in near death experiences, they're saying they have an experience where it's more real than reality. But here we are, we're in reality. Sometimes it's kind of mundane and we don't see things. There must be a purpose for that sort of mundane reality, that we're supposed to be here and experience all this stuff. Do you think that there's a purpose or there's a
Oh
reason?
yes, I've gone back and forth on this too, and there's a couple of main schools of thought on this. I'll go over the more negative one, which I really don't subscribe to, is that we're here because this is an experiment. These interdimensional beings created us somehow, and it's like a luge farm, and they're just using us and feeding off our energy. And the good positive experiences are only to give us false hope and build up that energy. So when a bad experience happens, it'll be more for them to cipher. And that's just a horrible type of existence, to think that we live in this and that when we die, we'll just be perpetually reincarnated
Recycled?
through a white light
Hmm.
trap and just luge farm all day. But no, I don't think it's that. I think that this is an experience by us for us. I think that our interdimensional, our soul essence, whatever we are outside of this, has either created this, or this is an experiential realm where we choose to come in. And everything, when we come in, we forget everything. It's a realm of forgetfulness. That's just the density that we're in, that we can't remember. Because man, every time I have a profound psychedelic experience, when I come back, it's like I forget 90% of the things that I've experienced. So it's
Right.
just the nature of what this realm is. And I think it's here for us to learn and grow and become more of a powerful spiritual being, and have that stronger connection to God. And I think that we can't learn unless we have these. We have to have even the negative experiences. It's all here for us. The polarities, positive and negative. We're supposed to learn from them and bounce off of them. Unfortunately, people become attracted to the negative polarities and they get stuck in them. And that's where, darkness, depression, drug use, all the bad things start to occur, is when you don't use the polarities to learn from, but instead embrace those dark ones, and you get stuck there. So that's where I'm at with what this is and why we forget, because if we were able to remember so easily, it wouldn't be. It's kind of like a game of life.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
not meant to be easy, but there are cheat codes, and I think the magic mushrooms are likened to Super Mario Brothers. You
Have you
after
have
you
you
beat
ever
the magic.
done have you ever done DMT? Like,
Yes,
yes,
I have.
because that's apparently a lot different. I've never. That's
It is.
apparently like almost all reality falls away or something.
Well, yes, it is. I've done DMT a few times. It's not for me because I
Yeah.
don't get. It depends on who makes it too, but I don't get the spirit of the plant, which is the most important part to me. There is a
Okay.
spirit
Okay.
in mushrooms that is a guiding spirit, and because I take such high doses, it's almost equivalent to when people have a DMT or a ayahuasca experience.
Right.
I can actually leave my body. I can enter these other realms, and I have this loving plant spirit there with me. And even if you like make chocolates out of psilocybin, to me, you lose the essence of what you're dealing with. That's why I
Right.
always eat them, just whole plant, right out of, dry them and eat them,
Right.
because
So we have a
uh, you
no. Go
miss
ahead.
some of the experience if you don't, for me.
We have a question from the audience. Beyond the Strange, Dave from Beyond the Strange podcast, great show.
Yes.
Does Chris research Bigfoot?
I do. Well, I wouldn't consider myself a Bigfoot researcher, but I love Bigfoot. And the film that I just put out, the Forbidden documentary, Occult Louisiana, covers Bigfoot experiences. I have had hundreds of Bigfoot researchers and experiencers come on my show. I love the Bigfoot phenomenon. This is something that when I first started, I was kind of skeptical of, didn't know what was up.
Hmm.
But the more I look into this, the more people I have on, the more I just have this knowing that there is some kind of being out there that is elusive. And the way I've come to understand it is may not be this like spiritual interdimensional being, but a flesh and blood humanoid creature that has consciousness abilities, that has not been exposed to technology in the material world. So they have a connection to these spiritual gifts and maybe even a
Mhm.
connection to the other unseen entities that reside out in nature. And that's why they have the ability to perceivably just disappear, psychic
Right.
communication, pass through orbs and portals, and all the crazy stuff associated with Bigfoot. So yeah, I love Bigfoot.
Well, the good news, Dave, is our show next Tuesday is on Bigfoot with Blake Dusher, Bigfoot researcher. So
Yes.
8 p.m. Eastern, be here. Now, I'm going to play the final clip here that I've got, and then we can discuss that and close the show out and remind people about your projects and what's going on. This one is on consciousness. Let's have a look.
Being born again means it's the elevation of consciousness. You've gone from the primordial level of consciousness, the physical meat mode level, to a 5D ascension level of consciousness. Your body is still in the third dimension, but you're thinking from a much higher level. And this is the process that we've got to go through. It's not going to be a big war against the elites. It's going to be that we're all going to come to realize that we're all one. We're all one big family. We need to come together and do one thing: stop participating. And when we do that, the game is over. Being born again means...
All right, I thought that would be a really good way to finish up the show because we've
Yes.
talked about the elites, and now we can kind of finish it up with this idea of rising consciousness and not participating in the crazy stuff that the elites have. It's like a trap. So I'll let you take it and elaborate on what you think about that clip.
Yeah, and shout out to Billy Carson. He'll be on my show next month. I always love having those discussions with him. So what's happening now is incredible. And it's a little bit like I was saying earlier, to where once we have this awareness of what's unfolding, we can navigate through it and all the bullshit's just going to deflect off of us. They've already tried, I think, some of their biggest operations on us that the effects weren't as they desired. And if they were, then the agendas that they're trying to put forward are something that we don't understand at all. If their desire was to wake us up, there's something else going on that most people don't understand. And that's also something I consider. Maybe the people at the very, very top who have the best understanding of all these occult rituals and things that they're doing, maybe they're trying to evolve consciousness in some way. Maybe
Mhm.
they feel like they're obligated to do this because they have this secret mystery school knowledge that's been passed down for the centuries, for these certain bloodlines to hold on to and shepherd humanity in. And I'm having a gentleman on next week who believes this very thing, James True. He believes at the highest levels that they're not bad, they're not probably good either, but what they're
Hmm.
doing is they are doing a forced evolution through these strange operations, but the operations aren't meant to harm us per se. They're meant to rattle us into waking up. And if you step back and look at everything that's happened, man, maybe that is true. Maybe the subliminal Hollywood messaging, the symbolism that they've been putting forward is all so that really that we can become aware of it and wake up and maybe pull up our big boy pants and start doing things for ourselves instead of having to rely on psychopaths that attempt to steer our society and want to depopulate us in certain ways, which that's definitely there. There are people at very high levels that do not like humans, that would be very happy to eliminate 90% of the planet and have the rest of them living in little cubicles and hooked up to machines in the metaverse and have their energy siphoned off of all day. There's definitely those people, but I just wonder, how many of those people are really left? We have a lot of the Hydra heads that are being cut off and dying, a lot of Rothschilds dying, a lot of royals dying. So that is encouraging, but Is there always going to be a new head that pops up in the old one's place? Maybe, but it
I
really
think so.
won't matter if we don't participate with any of the bullshit anymore. And I think ultimately that's where we're headed. And I see a lot of positive things happening. I see a lot of people waking
Right.
up. I think we're going to
Well,
we're going to be in a better spot soon.
I think they have a few more punches to throw out
Oh
yet.
yeah.
I don't think we've even gone through anything close to Armageddon.
No, not yet.
No, I don't. I think the ride's going to get crazier and creepier. I don't think the ones at the top are very good people. Like you said, it's compartmentalized. So a lot of people, I'm trained in graphic design. I kind of understand how propaganda works now more and more and more as I was trained and watched articles and watched stuff that I didn't understand when I was younger. And it's slick. It's some slick propaganda that it's slick. It makes you think something evil is good and something good is evil. It's really convincing. And when you're born into it and you think the TV is the truth, you don't, the TV tells the truth. What
Yeah.
more to question? Anybody who questions the big TV god is insane,
Yeah.
So I think they're going to throw some more punches at us. But I like that video because it's like, look, you got to stop interacting and you got to vibe high. My husband says that a lot. We got to vibe high. I don't know. I mean, can we vibe high enough so that I don't know, we don't get killed or nuclear bombed or Armageddon? I don't know.
Well, what I see is we're going to have breakaway civilizations. We're going to have people like yourself and myself that want to have that are on the right side of history, that are going to check out from the big cities and the technocratic systems and do their own things. Maybe create their own forms of positive technology and free energy and have a connection to source and nature still. And then there's going to be the other people who want to plug into the metaverse and have their energy siphoned all day and just become part of the system. So they're going to have those little pockets of people in the big cities. They're going to have the rest of the people across the rest of the planet just doing their own thing and not part of the system. And that's probably the way it's going to unfold, because I don't think everybody is going to wake up. I think it's impossible for everyone to wake up. There's too many people who enjoy that matrix steak and enjoy the debauchery and low vibrations of the systems, and too much, so
Yeah.
they don't want to check out.
It's reality for them, and that's how
Yeah.
things are. And if you tell them their reality is wrong or their pain or their victim status is not good, that you're messing with their identity, man.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's all they
it's
have.
hard to check out of the system sometimes, but once you do, and you and you just become aware how much of a slave you were to it, there's no going back. I don't think once you have this awakening, you can just shut your eyes and go back to sleep. I don't see how anyone could.
Yeah, well, especially not after the pandemic and all that crap. If you're awake, you're gonna see it everywhere.
Yeah.
So where can everybody find you
Yes.
online? To give all your information before we close out.
So thank you again, Melissa. This was great. You can find Forbidden Knowledge News on all podcast platforms. Our website is forbiddenknowledge.news. That's where we have the Forbidden Knowledge Network. We feature a bunch of other incredible podcasts. We're available. Our premium content is on Rockfin, rockfin.com/FKN plus. We are on Rumble, social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. And if you would like to help with funding the production of our next film, you can go to supportfkn.com. Anything is greatly appreciated there. And we're running a little thing right now. If you donate $100 or more, you get a guest spot on Forbidden Knowledge News. You get a copy of both of the films, the old one and the new one after it comes out. You're going to get a PDF of A Warning from History from Corey Hughes, and you're going to get your name in the credits of the film. So, like I said, anything is greatly appreciated. And thank you again, Melissa. This was great.
Oh, no problem. Just hang out in the green room. I'll be right there, and I'm going to close out the show. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Remember, the website, put it up here, is new. It's genxnews, genxnews.com. It has all the shows. It has the Gen X news that I do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's got this one, Ghostly Archives, there. And then Emily's show, The Beast System, is all conspiracy. It's over there too. So you can go over there. That I've had to put everything on one site because I definitely wasn't paying for multiple websites, because that's just crazy. Remember to follow on X. There is a Rumble channels, all the links, you know what, just go to the website. They're all there. And I thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys got a lot out of that conversation, and I found it very fascinating. So we're gonna round this out, and you guys take care. Thank you.